Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TTV Modcast, episode 13. We're doing Star Trek today, but before we get to it, let's get to our names. So, I'm Waj.
I'm Chronicler.
I am Political Slime.
I am John Smith.
And I'm Lego Master.
So, we're gonna talk about Star Trek. And we have two people that really haven't seen that many episodes of Star Trek. The noobs are me and Slime. I've seen like 4 episodes of The Next Generation and 1 episode of the original series, and Slime has seen like
2 episodes of the original series.
Yeah, basically everyone else has seen Star Trek. How much of Star Trek have you guys seen?
I've seen all of the original, most of Next Generation, all of Deep Space Nine, and a good chunk of Voyager, and all the movies.
I've watched the entire Next Generation series because that was the one series that our family actually got into. We watched it as a family, me, my parents, and my sister. And we watched it kind of out of order, though. We watched season 1 right in the middle of like 5 and 6, which was really weird. But anyway, I've seen a couple episodes from Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and the original series, and I have seen all of the movies.
I've seen a few movies. I've watched a good amount of the Next Generation and the OG series, but I like basically the OG series the best because it's really silly, like really silly. I just love cheesy stuff like that.
We had posted a list of episodes that me and Slime were supposed to binge watch, and and yeah, I mean, didn't watch all of them, but there were actually some people on the boards that, I don't know if they actually did binge watch them with us, because they didn't really update their status on that. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those people, at Lord Tuma and at Pack. So, we want to hear from you. How many episodes have you seen? I watched most of the Next Generation episodes on the list, which were Encounter at Farpoint, which was the first episode, and then there was The Measure of a Man, and Q Who, and Yesterday's Enterprise. Both me and Slime had seen the original series episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before, and Slime has watched another one.
Yeah, A Taste of Armageddon. So, I am of the opinion, having watched 2 episodes of the original series of Star Trek, that William Shatner's performance is rather flat, and that it is not very emotional, and that it's just sort of bland. John seems to think that that opinion is incorrect. I am of the opinion that my opinion is not in fact incorrect, but is correct, and that his voice just sounds like this the entire time, with very little show of emotion, and very driven and not very emotional whatsoever.
That's the genius of it, Slime. It's called Shatnering. Everyone is just jealous of it. It's its own acting style in itself.
I mean, if you don't think it's good, that's your opinion, but I would not say it is unemotive at all. And I don't know of anyone who thinks he's unemotive.
Well, that's kind of like the common joke on the internet, right? That William Shatner just sounds extremely robotic.
I've never heard anyone call him robotic.
No? You've never heard anyone making fun of William Shatner's way of speaking?
I mean, I've heard people making fun of it, but not for being robotic, but for being over the top.
How is it over the top? Over the top would be, oh, talk about this, and talk about that, and talk like this all the time. And this would be how William Shatner would sound if he was actually emotive. But he doesn't. That's not what he sounds like.
Over the top because he emphasizes every word to make it count.
That's not emotional. That's just...
Yeah, it is.
It's not. I don't know. I mean, it's most likely the fact that I just haven't watched enough episodes and I haven't really picked up on it enough. But especially having just watched A Taste of Apocalypse, he didn't seem like an interesting character to me. He just seemed very flat and boring. And I kind of felt the same way about Spock, about Leonard Nimoy. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. He's meant to be the logical, like, person, and, like, that's the whole thing about Vulcans, is that, like, they're not infected by emotion. And that's fine. That's a perfectly good character, but I don't know. It just seems like there's not...
I want to say something about this line.
Yeah?
Usually when it comes down to TV shows, this is especially when it comes to Star Trek, I think the characters were not as strong in the beginning, but as the series progressed, this is what I've noticed anyways. The acting gets a little better, especially when the characters they kind of grow a bit better. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
there was an episode where, like, Spock had to go to this really weird monster thing that was made out of, like, silicon and whatnot. And he put his hands on it, and he, like, showed a lot of emotion in his face, feeling the same pain as his creature, and trying to speak with it. That I could tell he really looked like he was in pain with that acting. And even Shatner's acting was better at the time. I think this is the case where when you watched only 2 episodes that are around the beginning, I feel like you didn't get to see the best of them.
I'm prone to agree with you and say that I should watch more episodes before making a full judgment, but this is my initial thoughts. So I agree. Like, to bring it to something that I have actually watched last week, you guys heard us talk about Avatar and how the first couple episodes of Avatar are not nearly as good as some episodes in the later season, or even just the later seasons in general. So yeah, I can totally understand what you're saying, how seeing it in its first initial, like, even where No Man Has Gone Before was, what, the pilot?
Technically.
It was made to be the pilot.
Yeah, I can understand how that would be. That's just my initial thought.
As the only person here who has seen all of the original series, I want to say first that actually I think the first season is the best. There is something to the actors and the writing getting better over time. It happens in the first few episodes. However, I think it is hard to pick up on the characters probably after just seeing 2 episodes, no matter at what point in the series those 2 episodes happen to have been made. Spock is an easier character for me to get into than Kirk, or at least to explain. So I want to address him first. Spock outwardly does not show emotion, but inwardly he has more emotion than humans usually do. The conflict of his character is trying never to show that emotion, which you don't really get in this episode, but there are several other episodes where that becomes very prominent and causes all sorts of problems for him.
As Kirk said in The Wrath of Khan, he was the most human person I ever knew.
It's interesting that Slime says that about, like, Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, because, like, you know, I've watched more of the Next Generation, and I just thought, like, a lot of them were just kind of devoid of emotions a lot of the times.
I think a lot of the Next Generation comes off as kind of stuffy almost compared to the original.
Yeah, I mean, like, so some episodes had really interesting conflicts. I really like the one called The Measure of a Man, with Data's whole thing, and how, like, there was that guy that wanted to dismantle him, and they had this whole, like, court trial thing that they were basically trying to determine, what is he? Is he a sentient being, or is he just a robot slave, like property of the Enterprise? Or is he his own being, since he's an android? Which I find really interesting. I just find artificial intelligence really interesting. And the decision is, you know, that he gets to stay because he's basically treated as, you know, a new life form. And I really never thought of that. Like, if we did actually create super intelligent devices or robots, basically, then I guess I never really thought of it like that they are new forms of life. I don't know why. It seems really kind of obvious, but it just didn't really occur to me for some reason. I guess because it's not in the way that we usually see life, but that's because we only have a really small sample size anyway, so we don't know what kind of life is out there.
Yeah, that's just something to get into something positive that I did like about the 2 episodes that I watched, is that they both had very interesting and very intellectual themes. So, like, in Where No Man Has Gone Before, you know, it's the whole...
like Kirk's old-time friend, and they get zapped at some point, and he gets, like, ESP powers, and he basically goes mad with power, and kind of corrupt.
Right, the whole absolute power corrupts absolutely thing.
Yeah.
And then, like, A Taste of Apocalypse touches upon the themes of what it means to be at war and death and stuff like that. And it's very interesting, I will say. I do rather enjoy that bit about Star Trek.
I'd agree. At least from the episodes that I saw, there was a lot of things that were interesting ideas that they formed the episodes about, but the actual, at least for the Next Generation, like, okay, sure, it's intellectually engaging, but for the actual acting aspect of it was just kind of dry and dull.
I think another part of it is that there's a big problem with Next Generation's characters, which is that they all have basically the same. With the original series, the episode you watched, Voyage, doesn't have Dr. McCoy in it, but it has Kirk kind of filling in for him, being the voice of morality, and then Spock is, the cold, rational one. Not to imply that he isn't also a voice of morality, but he's not he's not like a bleeding heart about it. He can seem cold to us mere humans. And all of the drama in the original series comes from the conflict between emotions and logic and trying to balance them. In the Next Generation, everybody has like the same quote unquote enlightened worldview, and they try to avoid conflict, and they preach about the Prime Directive all the time, even to the point where they're willing to let people die because of it. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least from the episode that I saw of the original series, it seemed like Spock and Kirk were basically like the two main characters. But for the Next Generation, I mean, I guess you could say it's Picard, but then there's like Riker and Data, and there's not the clearest indication of like who you should be sort of rooting for, I suppose, or like just follow, but because they all kind of seem pretty similar. They don't seem as distinct, even though there are, characteristics of them, like, Data's an android, and the Worf is a Klingon, and it just doesn't seem like.
But a lot, yeah. A lot of those distinctions are pretty superficial, especially amongst the humans in the cast, I would say.
Yeah.
Like they try to characterize Riker by having him be an Alaskan and play jazz trombone, and he has father issues, but most of those aren't really character traits so much as descriptions, if that makes sense. They're not really things that emotionally drive the character, they're just fact about the character.
I don't know what you guys are talking about, because I always see a lot of characters in Star Trek that I think have a good amount of personality. I always viewed Riker more as like, he's kind of like a manly guy in a sense. Picard, he likes to think about things, but he can be a little sarcastic, sometimes even a bit rude if you think about it. Worf, he's always about honor and, Motunui stuff, but
Worf and Data are definitely the most distinct characters.
Yeah, I remember there's an episode where Worf's wife gets killed by another Klingon, and he goes and battles the guy. Doesn't he kill him? I think he kills him. And so, it goes on his record for Starfleet. You could really see the emotion in him, and I think there's a driving theme throughout the series where Worf's trying to kind of suppress. It's like an opposite of Spock. He's trying to suppress his Klingon nature, become more human, and it's the antithesis to him in a sense.
Actually, I would say Data is really the antithesis of Spock. Worf, I see what you're saying. Like, there's a similarity and there's a difference there. Worf, he is trying to become more human instead of less, but ultimately he's trying to kind of repress himself, which is also what Spock is trying to do. Whereas with Data is a being who literally has no emotion, who wants to become human and have emotion, whereas Spock is someone who has lots of emotion, who wants to get rid of it.
I was actually taking notes throughout some of the episodes, and I kind of just want to read my log on Encounter at Farpoint, because I just thought, like, that one was just a strange way to open a show, as well.
It really was.
Like,
I barely remember it.
yeah, it wasn't really that good. Okay, so here we go. So, Wodge's log. Stardate negative 30,652.8. I have just completed watching the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, entitled Encounter at Farpoint. At first, it seemed to be a promising futuristic adventure story about space explorers, but a few minutes in, a weird ghost man shows up and starts talking like some discount Shakespeare about the savage nature of humankind. And then he tries to wrap the Enterprise in a laser net, as well as successfully insta-freezing one of the crew members. So from this we can only assume that the Ghost Man is some kind of deranged fisherman from the future past. Speaking of crew members, there are quite a few that take the spotlight in this episode. Mainly, the aged Captain Picard, who is bald and dislikes children, and the newly appointed commanding officer, Riker, who has hair and seems to dislike androids, but not really. A virtual trial takes place with the Ghost Man as judge, and the crew members as defendants. Another crew member gets turned into a lollipop, but is quickly unfrozen moments later. So what was the point? So, guilty until proven innocent is the name of the game for the Fisher Judge, Spectre. And the courtroom illusion fades. And at some point the Enterprise splits into two, and there are some scenes where people talk. And there's a kid named Wesley Crusher, but we don't see him crush anything. A missed opportunity, to be sure.
Just tell the kid to shut up all the time.
Yeah. Then there's a really old guy. Halfway through the episode, they indeed encounter the Farpoint, and some of the crew teleport there for a reconnaissance mission. And Ghost McFry Jones shows up one last time to taunt the precocious Picard, but he is unfazed, and he fires the phasers at the planet to reveal the ultimate truth. Jelly mushrooms in space.
In space.
Yeah, that was my summary of Encounter at Farpoint. It was weird, man. Like, Q was really kind of unnecessary, I thought, for the episode.
About the whole Q thing, the thing is that, like, I think I'm of a similar mind to Chronicler and hopefully John in this. Q is personally one of my favorite parts of TNG.
Q livens things up whenever he shows up.
Exactly,
Yes,
he's so fun, and he's an incredible foil to Captain Picard. Just the two of them, John Delancey and Patrick Stewart, just have such great chemistry on screen together. They have so many just fun and also insightful moments. So it's John, would you describe them as a bit of TNG's version of like Spock and Kirk in a weird way?
In a weird way, almost, except much more antagonistic. Maybe more like Spock and McCoy.
Definitely, like, Q was really a lot more expressive than all the characters, so I'll give him that.
I've been always wondering why they had to change the Klingons' looks.
Basically, when they made the first movie, suddenly they had like 100 times the budget they did on the show, and they decided, let's make everything look better and make the Klingons actually look like aliens. So they did. Later on, I think Roddenberry said something like, you should pretend the Klingons have always looked the way they do with the forehead ridges and stuff, and the way they look in the original series is because they didn't have the budget to show them like that. Though there's an Enterprise episode that explains why at that time period there were more human-looking Klingons.
I've heard that it's basically this kind of like genetic mutation kind of thing. We can probably look it up online, but it's like some kind of mutation makes all of the Klingons look more like humans for a couple generations. And it somehow makes its way to like the entire Klingon species pretty much. It's one of those retcons that is made necessary by just plain technology advancements and TV show budgets.
Though at the same time, part of me kind of wishes they'd just left it unexplained. As like bizarre thing for fans to argue about. And they kind of joked about that in the Deep Space Nine episode Trials and Tribulations, which is where the Deep Space Nine crew goes back in time and, like, they ask Worf why the Klingons look different, and he just says, "We do not discuss that." And
Basically lazy writing.
it's not lazy writing. That's just making a joke out of reality of production. Like, one last thing about, I think, kind of what Wad was touching on with the Next Generation characters feeling a little flat, and also tying it together with the one original series episode he did see. In Where No Man Has Gone Before, that episode is really like, it's almost a thesis statement for the whole show. The show is all about exploring the human condition, and that episode is about what the human condition is. And basically what that episode is saying the human condition is capable of greatness, but also inherently flawed. And obviously it illustrates that with Kirk's best friend, Gary Mitchell, who becomes all-powerful, and because of that, basically loses all sense of morality and connection to any other living being, and just tries to kill everyone. But then also we see through Kirk and Spock and the other scientists who get superpowers that humanity is also capable of compassion and reason and overcoming its worst instincts. Like, that's what the original series is all about. The problem, I think, well, one of the problems that I have with the Next Generation is they throw all that out the window, and they say that humanity has evolved by that point to be perfect and without flaw. And I think that's a big reason why the characters on that show end up feeling kind of sterile. I should add a footnote to that statement, which is that not all of the characters on that show feel sterile. I think Data and Worf in particular do stand out, especially as you watch more.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch more, and we're probably going to do, at some point, a part 2 for our Star Trek conversation, but that will be much later, probably, once we've seen a lot more episodes. So that was our Star Trek discussion.
Yay!
And we've already recorded next week's episode, which is Korra, so look forward to that.
Don't break the immersion.
Yeah, I know. So, goodbye, everyone.
Live long and prosper.